ground, don't disregard it. Strip you off the ground, show you what heart is. Standing strong and proud, nothing can knock it. Let's get it started, it's the hardest. Talk around, don't disregard it. Strip you off the ground, show you what heart is. Standing strong and proud, nothing can knock it. Let's get it started. Yeah,
get your boots ready. We're about to go on a trip where we wrestle, nobody settling or calling it quits. You're here for the grit, betcha this stuff is amazing. You're stumbling? Welcome to the bump in the apron. Step into it, the hardest part of the ring. Here to bring fun, yeah, in this art he is king. It's the best thing, making sure you don't tap out. Don't go soft with the hardest podcast out. And it's not just another one, it's clear. Off the rest, in this content, none contest. Take the nonsense off the steps. You know it's nothing but pure gems when it's coming off the chest. Get it? Now it's time to sit and relax. Get your mind blown away, ain't no skipping this track. Have you paying more attention, no listening gap. Get everything I ever wanted, no giving it back.
Ooh, what's up everybody? Welcome to the Apron Bump podcast. I'm your host, the hardest part of the ring, Kyle Bird. How's everybody doing today? Hope everybody's feeling honorable today. Hope everybody's ready to extend their hand out and let me caress it gently but firmly for the Code of Honor, because we got some Ring of Honor to talk about today from November 2003. That's right. Big old month for Ring of Honor. So we had the previous show, Main Event Spectacles. So in reality, there was actually 3 events in November. So they're really ramping up the, I guess the demand in Ring of Honor is really popping at this point. Really starting to get a buzz about it. A lot of international kind of recognition it's getting, which we'll talk about later. I'll just mention it now. The next show in December is going to have a lot of all Japan influence on that card, but in November, almost no Japanese people, so don't worry everybody. I gotta remind everybody that I'm Asian, so I can make those Pearl Harbor jokes. Maybe it's best I don't list a lot of racist Asian things. What was I talking about? Right, Ring of Honor, November, 3 events. Main Event Spectacle was early in November, and we talked about that. We had the Scramble cage match. We had an all-star 4-way. We had Bryan Danielson versus AJ Styles. Lots of stuff happening on that show. Go check that out in the archives if you have not already. But today, we're going to talk about 2 shows, 1 weekend, 2 girls, 1 cup. So we got the first double shot weekend for Ring of Honor here on 11/28 and 11/29. So we got the conclusion occurring on the 28th from Fairfield, Connecticut, and we got War of the Wire occurring on 11/29 from Framingham, Massachusetts, or as far as most people will understand it, pretty much Boston. So we got Boston and Connecticut represented here at the tail end of November of 03. Lots of stuff happening on these shows. I will I think let me give you a little appetizer. Let me give you the mozzarella sticks, the shrimp tempura, what else do you get as an appetizer? Cunnilingus, all those things you get before the main dish. This is what I'm going to give you right now. I'm going to run down the cards here. If you're watching on YouTube, by the way, first of all, before I even delve into anything, check it out on YouTube. Why don't you? Check out the video version. I might have graphics. I might have other visual aids. Hell, just look at my face. Look into my eyes as I discuss Samoa Joe to you. Okay? No, don't look away. We got the conclusion. The first show of this weekend. Again, from Fairfield, Connecticut. We got The Backseat Boys taking on the Outcast Killaz. We got John Walters versus Homicide. We got a number one contendership for the tag team title Scramble match, supposedly. We'll get more into that later. We got the team of Fast Eddie and Hotstuff Hernandez versus the Carnage crew versus SAT versus Special K. We got Christopher Daniels versus Jimmy Rave. We got Steve Corino versus Josh Daniels. We got a Field of Honor Block A final match. Matt Stryker versus Xavier. We got a Field of Honor Block B final three-way match. Little tiebreaker action. We got Dan Moff versus BJ Whitmer versus Colt Cabana. Then there is the Ring of Honor tag team titles are on the line. The Briscoes taking on the team of AJ Styles and Samoa Joe. Main event is a old school steel cage match. CM Punk versus Raven. We'll delve more into some of this, not all of this, but some of this as we continue on. But that is the first night of the weekend. The second night, kicking it off with the team of Fast Eddie and Hernandez versus the Backseat Boys. Following that, we got a Scramble tag team match. The team of, I guess it's a 10-man tag. We got the team of Slugger, the Carnage crew, and SAT versus Special K. Then we got a gauntlet match, which is CM Punk versus Jimmy Rave versus Matt Stryker versus BJ Whitmer versus Colt Cabana. Then we got a tag team match. The team of April Hunter and Slick Wagner Brown versus the Outcast Killaz. Then we got John Walters versus Xavier. Then the tag team titles are on the line. The whoever won that first night, no spoilers here, is taking on the Prophecy, team of Christopher Daniels and Dan Moff. Then we got the Ring of Honor World title on the line. The champion Samoa Joe is taking on AJ Styles. And then the main event of night 2, which in all reality is kind of what this whole weekend is building towards. We got a no ropes barbed wire match. Steve Corino versus Homicide. What a wacky cast of characters on this weekend. That brings... What if that was just the entire podcast? It was just me listing the card. That brings the cards. That covers the cards, basically. So that's what we're going to be getting into today. If you are unfamiliar with these kind of package deal episodes, these double show episodes, I won't be going into every single match in depth, but we'll be covering the major bullet points, the kind of common threads throughout the weekend, the running storylines, the implications of certain matches, and just the key moments we'll be talking about today. So, kind of a weird. I would say the second night more so is very strange. The first night is also kind of strange too, but we'll get into it. Overall thoughts of these shows. They were pretty mid, I'm gonna be honest. There were some very high points. There was points of much interest, I'll say. They were not all good per se. It's very interesting, going through 2003 Ring of Honor, only one show left this year. I would say overall this, I had no idea what to expect with 2003. It was always a major blind spot for me in terms of the history of this company. So I had no idea what to expect, but there is while there are some things that have far exceeded my expectations. There are certain characters, certain wrestlers that I've gotten invested in that I did not think I would get invested in. And I think that's a testament to the storytelling ability. Even in the early days of this independent wrestling promotion, they're putting on some good stories. And I think that's a big part of the reason why Ring of Honor was kind of, a step above other independent promotions at the time. It's because just the quality of talent there, and also the quality of the booking and just the presentation of it, I thought was really fun. And especially in a time period, 2003, You just got WWE out there. So in 2003 WWE, which I'm also covering on this podcast in a different timeline. I mean, it's just SmackDown's pretty good, but god damn it, the flagship show, Monday Night Raw, is the drizzling shits. And the point being, Ring of Honor is kind of, it felt like a haven for fans who wanted something different. And I think there's a lot of good that came out of this year, but there was also some not so good. But we'll get into that. But that, my overall thoughts, I guess, of these shows was like, it didn't get my heart pumping. You know what I mean? It didn't get my cock hard. It didn't get my butthole puckered. You know, everything was kind of flaccid. Not completely flaccid. Maybe a half chubbed butthole is my my in-depth analysis here. Analysis. That's fun. But yeah, let's get into it, baby. What should we talk about first? Well, you know what? Let's start this one off with how I started my last double shot episode off. Let's talk about CM Punk versus Raven. The seemingly never-ending feud between these two. And if you've been listening to these episodes, every show, I'm like, well, that's got to be it, right? This feud's over now, right? It's not. But as per the name of night one, the conclusion, it's named that in lieu of the conclusion of the CM Punk Raven feud. Now, I talked about this in a previous episode, how this feud didn't really live up to my expectations per se. I don't necessarily know if it's on. I don't really know if there's anyone you can blame for that. I think it's just the nature of Ring of Honor in this time period. I mean, there's, a month in between shows a lot of times, and Raven's also in TNA doing things, and so is Punk, by the way. And Punk's wrestling God knows where else, probably Japan, I'm sure. Hell, I don't know. Maybe not. I could be completely wrong about that, but because the storyline, it reached a really hot point. I want to say it was in the middle of 2003 sometime. I can't remember what show it was, but CM Punk and Raven, it's a natural story, right? You got Raven, who's the debaucherous, rabble rouser, drinking and smoking and suppositories and all that stuff, right? Doing all sorts of drugs and a lot of hullabaloo, a lot of extracurriculars from old Raven here. Whereas CM Punk, obviously, I don't know if you've heard, he's straight edge. And, a natural clash there in cultures, how Punk thought Raven reminded him of his deadbeat father, how Raven thought CM Punk was being disrespectful, and how Raven had been trying to better himself, and CM Punk is not respecting that. There was a whole thing there, right? The heart of the feud, I thought, was solid. But I think it just got spread a little thin. I think, because, like I said, the middle of 2003, you had the dog collar match. You had all these great promos between the two. But the beginning and the ends of it were kind of directionless. And we're at a point here in November of 2003 where it's been months since anything. Because, CM Punk and Raven, they had that really bad cage match a few months ago. And then there was a few months went by where there was no interactions between the two. So it's kind of just fizzled out. And it seems like we're just tying up loose ends here just for the sake of it. And we could talk about the match here in a second. But overall, I mean, the feud, I will say this. The feud here, it was a fairly satisfying ending. Not completely, but now let's quit dilly-dallying here and let's talk about the cage match here. Well, first of all, so the conclusion, night one opens up as Gary Michael Capetta is in the ring. This is stupid. So the gimmick here, it's a lethal lottery, right? So it's essentially when Raw would do Raw roulette and they would have a wheel and they would spin it. And it would be like a match type. Whatever match type it landed on is what the two guys would wrestle in. So that's basically what we got here. But instead of a big wheel, instead of this grandiose presentation, what does Ring of Honor got? I don't know. They got 5 or 6 envelopes that our referee, so GM Gary Michael Capetta and the referee are in the ring. The referee has this like handful of like 5 different envelopes. Gary picks one. First of all, I've never seen anybody struggle with opening an envelope more so than Gary Michael Capetta. He obliterates the envelope trying to get this piece of paper out of it. The piece of paper has the match type on it. He opens it, he reads it. CM Punk Raven, main event, are going to face each other in an old-fashioned steel cage match. So not the Clockwork Orange House of Fun bullshit that they did a few months ago, where there was like weapons hanging from the cage and just a bunch of nonsense. We're just going to get a straight up solid steel cage. 2 guys battling it out, surrounded in steel, surrounded in hatred? I don't know. But that's what we got here in the main event of night 1. So let's just start there, why don't we? Main event of night 1. CM Punk versus Raven, steel cage. So commentary is very, very much making it very clear, which, by the way, if you're unaware, the commentary team is comprised of Chris Lovey, otherwise known as Gabe Sapolsky, the booker here of Ring of Honor, and Ray Morrow. So Gabe on commentary, he always does this, right? He says, the winner of this match will win the feud. Okay, so I get it. We're putting over that this is the last match, right? We'll win the feud. What the fuck does that mean? This stuff just makes my eyes roll in the back of my head. Win the feud, or like feud of the year is a common phrase he throws out there. It's like, according to who? Like, because you're a kayfabe commentator. You're trying to in kayfabe describe what's going on, but when you say they will win the feud, that kind of takes you out of kayfabe and puts it in like the booking kind of realm. It's like, oh, these guys are gonna stop getting, that their shoot not gonna work, like. And I get it. That's kind of the audience they're playing to, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but that kind of stuff makes my eyes roll in the back of my head. So the match itself. Let's get into the match itself. It was a great match. Well, it was a pretty good match. What was the difference between this match and their previous cage match? Well, like I said, there's less, there's no tables in this match. There was no whatever other weapons, whatever other bullshit was in their original match. It was, and they described it as an old school steel cage match, and that's really what it was. They made a lot of use of the cage, ramming each other's faces into it, grating their faces across the cage. Of course, everybody's bleeding immediately, of course. I think there is like 1 or 2 chairs in the ring, but otherwise it's just them in the cage, which I think is like, it drives me crazy nowadays when you see like these cage matches, these Hell in a Cell matches, whatever the hell, right? And it's like the cage is just an afterthought. It's more about like the other tables and the barbed wire and the bed of nails and all that stupid bullshit. It just happens to be surrounded in a cage, but you're not making use of what the gimmick is. The gimmick is the cage that's surrounding you. It's supposed to feel suffocating. It's supposed to be like, oh, if you try to escape, you're going to go head first into this cage, which is going to cut you up. The cage is the danger. And I feel like in 2023, the cage is just like it's just the venue of whatever other shit is happening inside it. I think CM Punk and Raven here did a great job in portraying that the cage was a weapon and portraying that this cage match was just, it felt like a conclusion. Like that's what the show is called. It felt like a good culmination of this feud. Personally, I think you could have very well ended it with the dog collar match a few months ago. But again, I think this was a pretty satisfying way to end it in a pretty solid match. Obviously, highlights of this. The chairs are in there, I think, purely for Raven to do his, classic drop toe hold into the chair. Well, he tries to do it in the beginning of the match, but Punk actually does a Sabu-esque triple jump. He like runs up the setup chair, hops up to the top rope, leaps back at Raven, but Raven takes another chair and just fucking shit cans it at Punk's face. So that was a fun little spot there. Again, both guys are busted open early, getting thrown into the cage walls. Raven's able to finally hit his drop toe hold into the chair. It just felt like a brawl. Like there were not a lot of like high spots. It just felt like a brawl. Like these guys didn't like each other. And I thought it was good. Well, okay, there was one high spot. CM Punk goes to the top of the cage, goes for a leg drop, but Raven misses. I mean, just the visual of all of this, Punk is just standing straight up on top of the cage, goes for it all. He doesn't hesitate. He's just leaps off the top of the cage, which is not something you really associate CM Punk doing, but the visual was crazy. And this allows Raven to, because a lot of the match, Punk is beating up on Raven. But Raven, after this missed leg drop, he gets some fire. He does all of his vintage stuff, the $1 million knee lift, the bulldogs. He whips him into the corner, follows it up with a clothesline. But Punk is able to reverse Raven and hits Raven with the Raven effect DDT. And by the way, I should mention, you can win this match by pinfall submission or escaping the cage, which I've talked a lot about that stipulation. Won't get too far into it, but I feel like if we're blowing off this feud, I don't know, man. I don't like the escape the cage deal. Because it's like, if you have the time to escape the cage, why not just pin the guy? I don't know. But Punk, after hitting the Raven effect, goes to the top of the cage, like in the corner where the door is. Punk starts climbing down. Raven pushes the door open. Punk crotches himself on top of the door. And as Raven is trying to work up the muster to try to escape via the door, Punk is able to shimmy off the door, shoves the door in Raven's face, and Punk is able to scurry out of there, drops to the floor, and CM Punk gets the win. So kind of a weird, like, again, if it's a culmination of this feud, I would have liked to see a pinfall or submission, but I don't know, man. It was a fine match. It's just, I don't know, the build up to, because like during the show, because this is the main event of this show, right? And we'll talk about this too. By the way, I should also mention, throughout the show, the ongoing storyline with CM Punk, because CM Punk is a member of the Second City Saints, which is him, Colt Cabana, Ace Steel, and it previously was Lucy, aka Daphne. But a few months ago in Dayton, Lucy was attacked at the end of the show. But nobody knows who attacked her. Nobody knows who took her out. And CM Punk, by God, will not quit until he finds out who attacked Lucy. See him in the beginning of the show, the deal with GMC and the ref picking up the envelopes. Punk interrupts that, and he's like, he has that little 8x10 of Lucy, and he's like, look at this face. I want to know who attacked her. And he comes out after almost every single match, maybe every single match, actually. And some of the promos even, CM Punk is interrogating everybody. Where were you in Dayton? Do you know anything about this? So he's doing all of this shit. The Saints and the Prophecy are at odds as well. So we got all this stuff with Punk going on, and Raven just seems very much an afterthought, like a third, fourth tier feud for him, which commentary is putting this over as if this is the feud of the year. So it's like, and Punk is not mentioning Raven at all throughout any of these promos he's cutting throughout the show. So it's like he doesn't even know this match is happening, is what it comes off like. So the build to this going into the main event, the environment just, to me, didn't have a lot of heat to it for like a culmination of this feud, because it, like I said, it just seemed very secondary. And Raven hasn't had any presence on this show, no promos from Raven or anything. So it just felt like, even though this is a blow off to the feud, it just seems very separated from the initial heart of the feud, which is what I talked about earlier with, Punk and his dad, and how his dad was an alcoholic, and how Raven reminds him of his dad and the whole blood feud earlier in the year with the dog collar matches and the bleeding and all that stuff. This match just seems almost random in a sense. But the match itself mechanically was very good, I thought, even though the finish kind of could have been better. But that's that. That's enough Punk versus Raven. I'm going to get more. But another thread throughout this weekend is two things that are kind of intertwined with each other. Let's just, we're looking at like a whiteboard, you know what I mean? We're trying to like tie all these webs together. In the middle of this whiteboard, we got Samoa Joe, the Ring of Honor world champion, has been champion since March. So what? That's 8 months now. He's been dominant, kinda. Actually, he's lost a couple times, weirdly, in a tag team match. He lost to Homicide, which again, we're just pretending that didn't happen, I guess. And he may or may not also lose this weekend. But Samoa Joe, Ring of Honor World Champion, has previously been embroiled in a feud with both of the Briscoe brothers, who happen to be the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions. If you'll remember, at Main Event Spectacle, they linked up with Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette turned on Samoa Joe, hit him with a tennis racket. The Briscoes ganged up on him. They beat him down in the beginning of the show. And the show may or may not have ended with Joe. It was behind closed doors, so we don't really know what he did to Jim Cornette. But I know the sound of sodomy, and it was not too far off. So do with that information what you will. But so we got Joe and the Briscoes at odds, right? Plus, Joe and Jay had a great world title match a few months ago as well. And then on the other side of Samoa Joe, you got the number one contender for the world title. You got AJ Styles. So Joe is kind of in the middle of, two different feuds, but they intertwine here in night one in a Ring of Honor World Tag Team title match. We got the Briscoes, Jay and Mark, versus the team of AJ Styles and Samoa Joe. So we got the number one contender and the world champion on the same team, looking to become double champion here is Samoa Joe. So some of my favorite matches in Ring of Honor up to this point, like in their history up to this point, have been the Briscoes versus AJ Styles and Amazing Red. And you got that here, just switch out Amazing Red with Samoa Joe. So it's like, still great, right? And it was a very good match, naturally, right? I mean, these four guys, Jay Briscoe, Mark Briscoe, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe. If I had to create like a top five in terms of, the quality that has been presented in the first 2 years of Ring of Honor, I would put all four of these guys in that top five. Homicide might take that fifth spot. So you just got a great representation of the company here. It's a semi-main event of night one. And we got, the following night, you're going to have AJ and Joe fighting for the world title. So you got that kind of, it's a can you coexist thing, But it's 2003 and it wasn't done to death like it is today. So, but this was, again, a very good match. It was very interesting because you know what's going to happen. There's going to be a miscommunication between AJ and Joe. It's going to build to their match the following night. That's what's going to happen, right? But they kind of throw you off the scent, I guess, in the beginning, because AJ and Joe dominate in the beginning of the match. They're just in sync. They're doing all the double teams, they're doing their finishers together, or they're attempting them. They're just doing all these various snappy double team moves. There's one point where AJ, he runs up Mark Briscoe's back to DDT Jay, all while Joe has Mark and a choke, and they're doing the double topes in sync to the outside. Joe's getting AJ to do his Olay kicks against the barricade. There's a weird level of camaraderie between the two, which is like you're fighting each other the next night. Although I guess it's not particularly personal. So in Ring of Honor, it's all about competition. So I guess it makes sense. But it caught me off guard how like they're just like high five and like, let's go, buddy. Like I could, but again, like maybe that's good that it's not what you typically see. I don't know, but it just caught me off guard. Joe gets a hot tag at some point, just shits on everybody. Both Joe and AJ do the Pele kick in sync, which is pretty sick. Joe hits a power bomb into an STF on a Mark Briscoe. Briscoes make a comeback, all their double team maneuvers, a double backdrop to Joe, double power bombs. Jay Briscoe levels Samoa Joe with a lariat. At one point, all four of these guys are down. AJ Styles goes for the Styles Clash on Mark, but Jay kicks AJ in the face to break it up. And as AJ goes to hit a discus clothesline to Jay ducks. And AJ, by golly, oh, Bob's your uncle, accidentally hits his own partner, Samoa Joe. The Briscoes, and then this clothesline knocks Samoa Joe out. The Briscoes double drop kick AJ to the outside. And Mark Briscoe hits a shooting star press onto Samoa Joe for the 1, 2, 3. So Mark Briscoe pins the Ring of Honor World Champion here. Even though obviously the shenanigans with AJ, the miscommunication and whatnot, the Briscoes retain their titles here. And Mark Briscoe, again, beats the world champion, which again, I'm Samoa Joe has always been built up as this dominant force, Ring of Honor. He just was never beaten. I mean, he gets beat every other month, it seems like. So, all four of these guys shake hands. Of course, AJ and Joe, I mean, they get a little hot and sexy with each other. They shove, they yell, they kiss, all that stuff. But that's all building to their match on night 2, which we'll get to in a second. But first, while we're talking about the tag team titles, let's just tie this bow up and talk about night 2. The Briscoes once again defending their tag team titles against the Prophecy, the team of Christopher Daniels and Dan Moff. So, and by the way, I should mention Jim Cornette is not on any of these shows. I guess Cornette just shows up when they're in his town. Maybe, I don't know. But the Briscoes still got that swagger about them. They got the new like country music. Like they're making steps towards what the Briscoes would end up being. They're still in singlets though, so that's still a bit off. But in these tag team titles, they're a bit cursed at this point. Because, the inaugural champions, it was the Prophecy, actually, but it was a team of Christopher Daniels and Donovan Morgan. I don't know where the fuck Donovan Morgan is. I think he's in wrestling in Kazakhstan or something, because he hasn't been seen in quite a few fortnights. And, Daniels and Morgan, I think they lost the titles. Xavier, was a stand-in for Morgan, and then they lost the titles to Amazing Red and AJ Styles. And they would eventually have to relinquish the titles because Red had to get knee surgery. I mean, it's still at least a year before he's back, I think. Then the Backseat Boys won the titles in a gauntlet match, but then they lost it in their first defense against Special K, and then Special K lost it in either their first defense or their second defense against the Briscoes. I think I got all the reigns in there. So there hasn't really been a definitive tag title reign yet in Ring of Honor. But, hindsight, the Briscoes, I mean, I'm never going to do a Ring of Honor review ever again that does not have the Briscoes involved. You know what I mean? So they're just the ultimate. They are Ring of Honor more than any other entity that's ever come in and out of Ring of Honor. The Briscoes are Ring of Honor. They were there forever. And we got their first tag title reign here. I'm not sure, in particular, I don't know how long this first reign lasts, but, the Briscoes are there to stay. And, they beat Samoa Joe and AJ Styles, and they beat the Prophecy here. So we got the Briscoes essentially, working to break the curse here solidifying themselves as the top tag team in this company. They feel like champions. They're brothers. The cohesion's obviously there, so it's like it all feels right, you know. But the match itself, it was very good. This differed from the match that the Briscoes had with AJ and Joe, because that first match, it was very, you know, I don't want to say spotty, but it was very flashy. You know, a lot of power moves, a lot of double team wackadoo shit, a lot of strong style, a lot of just linking moves one after the other. Whereas this match, Prophecy versus the Briscoes, felt more like a traditional tag team match. You have the Prophecy, who, by the way, if you're not aware, their thing is that they don't abide by the code of honor. They don't subscribe to the mindset of Ring of Honor, which is all about competition and shaking hands and, you know, not interfering, not distracting refs, all that stuff. And the Prophecy is they do all of that in this tag team match. There's a lot of, you know, one guy will distract the ref, or like they'll like draw out the Briscoe that's on the apron so that the Prophecy guys can double team on the other Briscoe. They're doing, you know, they make the tag sound and get in the ring even though they don't tag. So a lot of the classic heel tag team stuff the Prophecy is putting out there, but it ramps up towards the end. You got Daniels doing his Arabian moonsault to the outside. Mark follows it up with a shooting star press to the outside onto everybody. In the ring, Dan Moffitt's a back suplex on Jay Briscoe, which it looked like it actually knocked Jay out. Like, he wasn't moving for a while. I think he was definitely knocked loopy at least. But you got Angel's Wings, the springboard Doomsday device by the Briscoes. Everyone's pulling out the big guns during the ending stretch of this match, but ultimately, Jay wins, hitting Moff with the Jay Driller pile driver for the win. So the Briscoes retain. You know, Mark got the pin the first night. Jay gets the pin the second night. Again, just a great match. It was pretty grounded, good false finishes, just a classic tag team wrestling match done very well. So no qualms from ya boy here. So happy for the Briscoes. Happy to see them here as a strong tag team finally. It felt like they were kind of lollygagging for a while, but we're here, we're queer, and yeah, we're just queer. But to tie up, so you got Samoa Joe in the middle, right? Just kind of walking us back. Joe in the middle, Briscoes on the left side, let's say. So the Briscoes, we've covered that. Now on the right side of Samoa Joe, you got AJ Styles. They had the hullabaloo and the tag team title match on night one. Miscommunications, all that, right? The shoving, the kissing, you remember. Night two, they get to blow this off. They get to blow it off in a Ring of Honor world title match. Samoa Joe, the champion, defending against AJ Styles. And I should say on night two, it opens up with a promo from Samoa Joe backstage saying that, you know, people on the internet are saying that I've lost it. They're saying that I'm not a monster anymore, which is kind of what I've been talking about, right? How Joe's been kind of losing pretty frequently. But Joe's out to prove people wrong, I guess. And by golly, does he? Because Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, I mean, you get these two guys in a match, it's never going to be not great. It's the floor is great. So, like, and it's interesting, though, because, like, you're a fan of the Apron Bump, or if you just listen to me, you know, I cover the TNA timeline, and I've encompassed all of the series of matches that Joe and AJ had, at least in the beginning portion of, you know, the X Division stuff between these two. And Joe and AJ had some awesome matches in TNA, dude. And keep in mind, that's two and a half years after this. So those TNA matches, they had a lot more experience with each other, a lot more chemistry with each other. They do have a lot of chemistry right off the bat here in Ring of Honor. You know, I'm not suggesting that they didn't have chemistry, but watching this match after their TNA matches, you know, because first of all, there are a lot of spots that they do in their TNA matches, like Joe kicks, like AJ is sitting on the first rope inside the ring, like leaning up against the second rope, and Joe just kicks through his chest, sending AJ to the outside. They did this exact spot in TNA, and I think the TNA one just looked a lot better. Maybe it's just because it had Don West screaming in the background. But you get a lot of that. It's a sense of like, this is very good, but it also gets a lot better. I had similar thoughts about like AJ and Daniels when they've had matches previously, like in 2002. It's like, okay, this is good, but it gets a lot better. You know what I mean? And that's just in the back of my mind, which unfortunately maybe hampers it a little bit for me. But that being said, I mean, this was an awesome match as well. Really fun, like in the beginning of this match, it's almost like they go out there. It's like what Angle, like Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit would do. They're like, all right, let's spend the first 5 minutes of this match just shoot wrestling. like let's have an amateur wrestling match just for funsies. And that's kind of what AJ and Joe do here. Very intense chain wrestling here. Like, it's not like, okay, let me hold your wrist so you can do a flip, and then I can do a flip, and then we can do skibbity bop, and then you can do bibbity boop. No, it's like, I'm going to run into you and hold you down and suffocate you and make your nipples purple. Like, that's what they're doing here. So there's just like there's a sense of competition. There's a sense of trying to win the match, which sounds very like duh. Like every match should have that. Every match should have that, but not every match does. So really good stuff here. Really good intensity from both guys, I think, is the main my main takeaway here. You got Joe doing his, suicide dive to the outside. He goes for the Olay kick, which I brought it up earlier, but it's basically a face wash on the outside into the barricade. But AJ, I mean, they were doing this last night, right? They were working together to do this. So AJ has that scouted. AJ tries to cut off this kick, but Joe ducks and super kicks AJ on the outside. Back in the ring, AJ fights back, hits a sick looking power bomb on Samoa Joe. That's a strong boy, this AJ Styles. You don't want none. You don't want none from him. Huge power bomb from AJ. Joe says, let me raise you one. Just obliterates AJ Styles with a power bomb of his own. Stacks him up. Does the classic Joe thing where AJ kicks out, but then Joe transitions into the STF and then the crossface. AJ is able to get to the ropes and he fights back with a Pele kick, the springboard backflip into the reverse DDT. So you're getting all the greatest hits from these guys. AJ Styles hits another powerbomb with Samoa Joe out of the corner, lifts him up, deadlifts him up into a Styles Clash position, hits it, but only for a 2 count. Crowd was really into that. You got AJ goes again for that springboard reverse DDT, but Joe catches him, hits him with the island driver for a 2 count. So we got some really good false finishes here towards the end. AJ, because if you remember in night 1, the miscommunication was AJ going for a discus lariat onto Jay, but accidentally hitting Joe. So in this match, AJ again goes for that discus clothesline, but with full intention of hitting Joe. Hits him only for a 2 count though, but Joe's able to get the upper hand, hits the muscle buster on AJ Styles, locks in the choke, and AJ passes out. So Samoa Joe retains the Ring of Honor World title. It was just a very fun, grueling match, which is kind of what Samoa Joe's deal is. So I really loved it. I love this one, but again, much, even better things. I'm not going to say much better things, but even better things to come in later years between these two. But always a treat watching these two guys wrestle. Yep. So that's the tag team titles. It's the world title. We've talked about Punk and Raven. The main event of this podcast is going to be the main event of night 2, which is the barbed wire match between Homicide and Steve Corino. But on the way there, we got some actually pretty good stuff. We got some stuff that if I saw this on paper like a year ago, I'd be like, I don't give a shit about it at all. But the way it's been building, the way it's progressed, the way these characters are starting to flesh out, actually some pretty good stuff. And we're going to talk about it. This all kind of ties together. So you kind of got this like this pure division, right? And again, I know the pure title comes into the fold at some point. I'm not sure exactly when. And I'm not sure who's exactly going to be fighting for this pure title. But as I perceive it, you got kind of this pure division. You got guys like Xavier, John Walters, BJ Whitmer, Matt Stryker, Jimmy Rave, Josh Daniels. You got kind of those guys, right? Plus a few others, but these are the guys that are represented on this weekend of shows. And these guys are first represented on night one. So the kind of the running theme of night one was present versus future. So you got the present and guys like Christopher Daniels, Homicide, Steve Corino, versus the future, guys like Jimmy Rave, guys like John Walters, Josh Daniels. So you got a series of singles matches on night one that were all pretty good. I'll start off with the best of these matches. Homicide versus John Walters. So again, like I've mentioned this in previous episodes. John Walters is a guy that I did not think I would end up enjoying as much as I have. He's pretty bare bones, relatively, right? When you look at him and you watch him wrestle, I mean, at least for me, the immediate comparison is Chris Benoit. Maybe aesthetically, he's kind of a leaner version of Benoit, a little bit lankier, perhaps. Maybe less, Benoit had the brutal power chops and the really intense kind of strikes, whereas Walters is a bit more technical, like more British style, perhaps. I don't know. They're very similar though. But John Walters, he's not, lighting the world on fire with his promos, but if you're looking at the Ring of Honor landscape as of right now, Walters is, one of the most competent guys in terms of kind of just coming out there and getting his point across in promos and even in the ring, just he has a decent amount of charisma about him. So, especially when he's, kind of portrayed as this just pure technical wrestler, like I think and the crowd's getting behind him and you can see that resonating with the crowd. Like he's getting the crowd behind him and he's taking on Homicide, which I've said it before, probably the MVP of 2003, if I had to throw one out there. So naturally, these two guys coming together in a match against each other, it's going to be really good. And it was probably one of the better, potentially like top 3 matches of the weekend. I should also mention, commentary mentions that Tony Mamaluke has left Ring of Honor. And if you're wondering why I'm bringing that up, is because there was a very short-lived tag team called the Purists that was comprised of Tony Mamaluke and John Walters, but I guess now Johnny Walters is no longer a part of that tag team, but it makes sense considering that, he's going forward with the singles push. Just a really fast-paced technical wrestling match between these two guys with a little mix of brawling. Of course, you got Homicide. There's going to be a good amount of brawling. There's one point, I'll probably post this on Twitter or whatever. Homicide gives John Walters a back rake. And we've seen this before. I've even heard Jim Ross talk on his podcast. He'll be like, I won't even call a back rake. It's stupid. Like, what's it supposed to do? You got to hurt somebody with a back rake? But Homicide rakes the back of John Walters. Makes his back bleed. He's getting color on his back from a back rake. So, brutal stuff here. But while you just got that like grittiness, you also got some pretty good, pretty innovative stuff from a wrestling standpoint. You got Walters I can only describe it so like a gory special, right? You got the guy on your back. His back is against your back and you're stretching his arms towards the center to stretching him out, right? You know what a gory special is. But he's got Homicide and it's almost like a reverse tarantula. Like it's in the ropes. It's very hard to describe with words. But just a lot of innovative stuff from John Walters here and really, really intense submissions. Again, it's like he's not just locking in submissions for the sake of holding them there for a bit, waiting for the next spot. He's like trying to rip his limbs off, which is something that I like to see. Homicide hits Walters with a neck breaker, a pile driver. Walters scoots to the outside, and then Homicide hits his beautiful tope con hilo through the middle ropes. Back in the ring, Walters hits Homicide with a backpack stunner for a 2 count. Hits Homicide with a dragon suplex with a bridge, but Homicide had been working on the neck of Walters throughout the entire match. Yeah, I mentioned the neck breaker, the pile driver, all that. So Walters couldn't hold the bridge on the suplex, so he kind of just fell out of the pin. So I thought that was really great storytelling there. And Homicide's able to kind of capitalize on this. Hits a reverse jawbreaker of sorts, and then a brutal lariat to the back of the neck, and then locks in the STF. And Walters has to tap out. Again, been working on the neck. The neck is fatigued, it's beat down, and a neck submission is locked in for the win. Just perfect storytelling, like I said. Really intense stuff. The crowd was into it. And Homicide gets the win here. And now this is night 1. And remember, in night 2, we're going to have Homicide versus Steve Corino and a barbed wire match. So we're kind of building to that with this match. Homicide gets the win. And speaking of which, let's talk about it. Steve Corino, also in night 1, taking on Josh Daniels. If you're not familiar with Josh Daniels, it's kind of like, I don't know, combine Chris Benoit and Roderick Strong, maybe. Like, make those guys have a baby. Not now. But I think I even tweeted this. It's like a week ago. Everybody in Ring of Honor in 2003 was trying to be Chris Benoit. Like the long tights, the style, the short hair. I don't know. Maybe that's just how people dressed back then. But it was just it was very striking to me how that style was kind of like him and Eddie Guerrero. Like everybody was trying to be those two guys in Ring of Honor. But if there's someone to be from a wrestling standpoint, it'd be those two. Not from a father standpoint though. But we got Steve Corino versus Josh Daniels. Not quite as good as the Homicide and Walters match, but it was fine. You got Corino doing his long intro shit again, which he has his personal ring announcer. There's always Bobby Cruz, who would go on to be the permanent ring announcer for Ring of Honor, but as of this point, it's just Corino's stooge, I guess. And so Josh Daniels is a relatively short fella. I wouldn't say he's very short, but he's shorter than Steve Corino. So Bobby Cruz is like, Steve Corino has faced off against a lot of other small guys, and he's just listing off like a bunch of, minis and, not Rey Mysterio, but like guys like that, like short wrestlers. And then he mentions Taz at some point, which gets a big pop out of the crowd. But this just goes on forever, and match finally gets underway. Corino is kind of a showcase for Corino in a lot of ways. He's hitting all his big moves. The Northern Lights bomb, the Colby Kazi, which is like an attitude adjustment type move. All of these for 2 counts, by the way. So Josh Daniels is also being very resilient here. So we're furthering the build of this guy. Corino hits another Northern Lights bomb. Josh Daniels kicks out at 1. So Josh Daniels is firing up. He's making a comeback. He's laying out Steve Corino. But at one point, Guillotine LeGrande, who was out there with Steve Corino, he trips up Josh Daniels, distracts him. Josh Daniels turns around to face Corino and walks into a super kick. But the ref will not count because he saw the interference. He's like, no, you're not going to win that way. So Guillotine is like getting on the apron, arguing with the ref. Why aren't you counting? Your dick's small. Your investments are bad. Like all the stuff you yell at a guy, right? Corino sets up Josh Daniels on the top rope, going for a superplex or something. And as the ref is tied up with Guillotine, Homicide makes a run in, hits an ace crusher onto Steve Corino off the top rope, because Corino and Daniels were both, on the top rope fighting for a superplex or whatever. Homicide gets in, ace crusher, RKO to Steve Corino off the top rope. Josh Daniels, who was already on the top rope, flies off with a headbutt, furthering the Chris Benoit stuff. Headbutt to Steve Corino off the top rope. And Josh Daniels gets the win over Steve Corino. Again, Homicide, Corino, we're building the tension between those two while also giving a win to Josh Daniels, furthering, kind of giving him some credibility. So I see what they're doing here. Not bad. Pretty decent stuff here. So Corino's pissed, of course, because, interference. And went against the Code of Honor, which I was flabbergasted by, I'll be honest. But the camera follows Steve Corino as he walks backstage. He finds Homicide. Him and Homicide start brawling. Security comes in to separate the two. Corino's yelling at Homicide, "I'm gonna fucking kill you!" Like, there's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of believability in that they hate each other, which is really like a great feud between these two guys. Maintaining the hatred, furthering the build towards their barbed wire match the next night. Corino eventually, because everybody's separating him, he eventually just walks away. He walks out the door into the parking lot. He's taking his tape off or whatever, and he's yelling into the camera, "This is why your company doesn't draw, is because you don't put me over." It's all right, you fucking dildo. More wrestling lingo, fucking cheese dick. But Corino's "You saw the format. I was up." I'm what are we doing? Where are we? When these guys blend kayfabe in real life in this kind of way, it's always cringe, but it's always cringe. It always, again, makes me roll my eyes, but because he's playing to the internet crowd and the internet fans, they want to be in the know. They want to use all the lingo, and Corino's trying to placate that. I don't know. It's dumb, but again, I mean, the whole angle itself I thought was fine. Steve Corino's pissed. He thinks Ring of Honor has a conspiracy against him of some sort. I don't know. But that's where we're at there. And that'll be we'll have more on that night too, of course. But so that was the second of 3 present versus future matches. The third one, which I'll just touch on pretty quickly, Christopher Daniels versus Jimmy Rave. It was a fine match. You have, because a few months ago, Christopher Daniels and John Walters had a really good match where Daniels kind of took Walters lightly. So Walters was able to kind of get the advantage of him in the beginning, but Daniels was able to kind of hit the switch and be like, all right, I'm done playing around, and then get the win. Pretty identical here, really, with Jimmy Rave. Yeah, Rave is getting the better of Daniels here in the beginning, but Daniels, again, is all right, I'm done fucking around. Best moonsault ever, last rites, gets the win. So Daniels beats Jimmy Rave. I don't think Jimmy Rave has won a match in Ring of Honor here yet, but we're also with Jimmy Rave because his mentor is AJ Styles, and after every time Jimmy Rave loses, there's a segment backstage where AJ is like, "Well, goddamn, Jimmy, well, why didn't you didn't attack the arm? You got to attack the arm. His arm's hurt. You got to put him in an arm lock or something. I don't know." So AJ's again, he's yelling at Jimmy Rave. He's like, you need a spark, Jimmy. What are you doing out there? You need a spark." And then Jimmy Rave shoves him into a locker, and then AJ's like, "Yes." He rubs his chin. So I don't know if we're building to a match between those two, but at least there's something going on, something building there, which is intriguing in a sense. But Daniels gets the win. And by the way, I should say, I brought up CM Punk earlier, how he was interrupting every match, or at the end of every match, storming the ring and asking the people in the ring if they know or if they knew what happened to Lucy. And he does this to Daniels, and Daniels is he says a lot of shit. He's I don't even care. He's like, "Punk, you can't handle the truth." So it's does he know something? Does he not? I don't know. It's a bit ambiguous, but because Daniels is kind of suggesting that maybe Steve Corino attacked Lucy, which is my assumption. Because at this point, Steve Corino and CM Punk are friends, kinda. So Punk, I don't think he ever questioned Steve Corino if he knew. So it's leading me to believe that we're going to get a Corino and Punk deal later, but that's just my assumption. So that's what's going on there. So Daniel's in the prophecy, and we talked about the tag team title match. So that's where we're at with that. But you know what else we got on the show? We got the Field of Honor finals matches within each block. So not the finals, just the finals within each block. Block A, Block B. If you're unfamiliar, the Field of Honor is a round-robin tournament. 2 blocks of 4. The winners of each block will face each other and become the Field of Honor champion. What's the stakes? Well, you get over, I guess. I don't know. They've been very vague about what the stakes are, but I assume a title shot of some sort for the winner. I don't know. But so in Block A, to see who goes to the finals, we got Matt Striker versus Xavier. Another really good match here. Again, 2 guys who I had no knowledge of, prior to reviewing these Ring of Honor shows. 2 guys that have just organically gotten over with the crowd, with myself watching. I love watching Matt. Matt Striker's so good, man. He's starting to develop a little bit of charisma about him. You can kind of tell that he's been, people have been telling him, you need to be a little bit more, I don't know, expressive, a little bit more animated, maybe. He's kind of talking shit to Xavier throughout the match or whatever. And Xavier, Xavier is Xavier. He has a great look. Xavier, he kind of just tries shit. He just, not all of his moves hit, but he does a lot of unique stuff too. So, a lot of submissions and chain wrestling here in the beginning. Progresses into some more strikes, some chop battles. Matt Striker hits Xavier with one of the most sickening forearms I've ever seen, or like an elbow. Because it's like he threw the forearm, but it's like Xavier didn't see it coming. So he like just almost took his head whiplashed back. I don't know how he didn't break his fucking nose or get knocked out, but brutal stuff here. Really fun, like strong strikes between the two. You got Matt Striker, who like when Xavier went to the top rope, Striker runs up the ropes, suplexes Xavier off the top rope. And I mean, this match is interesting because Xavier, his story's kind of been like, because his run really started with the prophecy, and the prophecy is all about cheating and distractions and interference and all that stuff. And Xavier has been winning a lot of his matches with like low blows and eye rakes and holding the tights and stuff like that. He's that type of guy. But this match, it's Field of Honor, and I guess they're trying to portray the fact that Field of Honor is the most pure wrestling it gets. So Xavier, this match between these 2 guys just felt very pure wrestling. A lot of counter wrestling, a lot of roll-ups and submissions, and I guess that's what they want this tournament to represent. So, but at some point, Matt Striker locks in the Striker Lock, which is like a Indian Death Lock move. Xavier gets to the ropes to escape, but he's not able to escape the Death Valley Driver from Matt Striker for the 1-2-3. So Matt Striker gets the win and is the Block A winner for the Field of Honor. Pretty good match, like I said. It was very moves, but it was pretty fast paced, pretty back and forth. So I liked it. I was entertained by it. Maybe the most entertaining thing about this was after the match. So you know how guys will taunt, like if you're like trying to intimidate somebody, right? You'll look at them and you'll do the throat slit, with your thumb, like like the Undertaker or whatever. But Matt Striker. One thing about Matt Striker that you guys need to understand, he has a unibrow. Okay, that's his character. He has a unibrow. So what does Matt Striker do as a taunt? After the match, he looks at Xavier. Across the unibrow. So instead of a throat slit, it's a unibrow slit, I guess. So that's what we got going on. That's what Matt Striker's got going on. But again, pretty good stuff here. So that's Block A. The Field of Honor Block B finals is a triple threat match. So we got a tiebreaker situation here. So it's Dan Moth versus BJ Whitmer versus Colt Cabana. One of the big takeaways, honestly, from this weekend is how over Colt Cabana is starting to get. Like, he's starting to gain a following. You can feel it. He's so entertaining. Plus, he has the very entertaining wrestling ability as well. So he would become a star in Ring of Honor, and he's slowly becoming that. even though at this point he's kind of just CM Punk's sidekick. But Colt, I mean, he comes out to the Copacabana. He's dancing to the ring, especially when he's across the ring from BJ Whitmer, who is coming into this weekend is about as bland as you can get. He does make strides to get past that in this show, which we'll get to. But you got BJ Bland Whitmer and Dan Moth, who everybody hates. So Colt Cabana naturally is who everybody's behind in this match. But you got a 3-way lockup to start, which is fun. I mean, everybody's kind of just playing to their strengths. Like Colt Cabana is like dancing to get out of the way, and at one point he hits an Asai moonsault to the outside onto both guys, or onto BJ Whitmer, and then Dan Moth is just, doing his thing. He thrives on the outside of the ring, so he's just shit canning these guys into the barricades. At one point, like this match, it wasn't very, a lot of triple threat matches, you get like, it's like 2 guys are fighting in the ring, and then 1 guy's laid out on the outside of the ring. This match was very much like all 3 guys wrestling each other, which I can appreciate, because I feel like it's hard to make that look cohesive, and I think these guys did pretty well at doing that. But like at one point, Colt has Moth on the ground. Colt, puts his neck in between his ankles and twists it, while also like suplexing BJ, and then you got Moth later. He Germans BJ while BJ is also T-boning Colt Cabana. So you got a lot of like intermingling like that. So pretty entertaining stuff here. Towards the end, BJ hits the exploder suplex onto Colt Cabana and gets the win. So BJ Whitmer wins Block B, which I thought Colt had this one, but BJ Whitmer wins. So that sets up the Field of Honor finals, which is going to be Matt Striker versus BJ Whitmer, which makes sense, right? Because I think there are 2 guys that I think this tournament was kind of built around. The pure wrestling style, 2 guys that are really good wrestlers but need an extra, little something, a little some kind of like they're not ready to be world champion yet, but they need a little something to elevate them above the pack. So like 2 guys that are good technically but don't have much else going on. So this will definitely elevate and give credentials to whoever wins this tournament. So, and by the way, I should say after this match, so BJ wins. And CM Punk's back, again, asking everybody what the hell happened to Lucy and Dayton. And everybody's like, I don't know, man. Who cares? Fuck you. But BJ is pissed. He's like, you're not going to steal my fucking thunder, boy. And then he storms out of the ring. He does the up yours thing. And then Punk. CM Punk, because BJ's pissed. So he storms away. Who, by the way, CM Punk was crying because he just wants to know what happened to Lucy. Like he's literally like, well, I just need to know where's, like it's very bizarre. But BJ storms off. He's pissed, and Punk's like, man, sounds like somebody's juices are flowing. And then the crowd didn't react. And Punk is like, that's a steroid joke. And then the music plays and it's over. But so that made me laugh. But yeah. So that's the Field of Honor, gang. That's the Field of Honor. And before we get to the main event, just kind of piggybacking off of that stuff. So that was all night 1. In night 2, we have a gauntlet match, which is CM Punk, Jimmy Rave, Matt Striker, BJ Whitmer, Colt Cabana. To be honest, this was it was way longer than it should have been. I didn't think it accomplished much outside of the last portion of it. So I'll just run through this kind of quickly. It starts out with Punk versus Rave. It's pretty boring. I mean, Punk locks in a sleeper at some point on Jimmy Rave, and the crowd is chanting, "Please fall asleep. Please fall asleep," because it was just so long. And then they do the hand thing where he raises his hand, drops it. And if it drops 3 times, he's out, right? So it's 1, 2, lifts his hand up a 3rd time, drops it. Rave, oh, I'm hulking up, brother. And the crowd's like, boo, because they just wanted it to be over. But it kind of kicks in, towards the end of that. So Rave hits a Shining Wizard on Punk for a 2 count. But CM Punk is able to hit the Pepsi Plunge for the win. But it's a gauntlet match, so we're not over yet, folks. So now Punk wins. Striker's out next. So we got Punk versus Striker. Punk had his leg worked on during the previous portion of this against Rave. And Matt Striker is able to take advantage of this, and he makes CM Punk tap out with the Striker lock. So Matt Striker gets a tap out victory over CM Punk. Again, I mean, it's, gauntlet circumstances, but it's still pretty significant. So Striker wins, and then Colt Cabana comes out, dances to the ring. At some point, Colt Cabana, he has Striker in like a camel clutch type move, and he starts plucking the unibrow, which is pretty dastardly. Hits a flying asshole for a 2 count. I mean, this is the best part of the gauntlet for sure. Colt versus Striker. Matt Striker hits his run-up suplex, a victory roll, a lion salt. He's just busting out all of the high-impact moves. Colt fights back with like an Emerald Fusion neckbreaker type of thing. But Matt Striker is able to hit that Death Valley driver onto Colt Cabana for the win. So Matt Striker beats both of the Second City Saints, which is very significant, I feel like. So which sets up the final portion of this gauntlet match, which is also going to be the finals for the Field of Honor, which, by the way, takes place at Final Battle the next month. But we get a little taste of it here in the final portion of this gauntlet, BJ Whitmer versus Matt Striker. Keep in mind, Matt Striker had already had 2 matches, so it's not exactly even footing. But they wrestle, they scuffle for a bit. At some point, both guys are up top on the top rope in the corner. Striker gets thrown to the outside, like onto the floor, and he passes away on the floor. Like the referees come out to check on him. He's not moving. He must have hit his head on the concrete, whatever the hell, So Matt Striker's down. There's no way he can continue this match. Referees are trying to help him. We need to get a stretcher out here, a back brace, or whatever the hell. But BJ Whitmer sees this. He doesn't give a hoot. He just throws the referees to the side, shit cans Matt Striker into the ring, hits a brutal looking wrist clutch exploder suplex, and gets the win. So takes advantage of this injury of Matt Striker, and BJ gets the win in this gauntlet match, pretty much picking the bones of the previous injuries. So BJ coming off like a dickhole here a bit. So we're establishing him as just the big bad dude, where Matt Striker is just trying to be all straight-laced Matt Striker here. So we're building some tension between these two guys, which I like. So building to their finals match at Final Battle. These guys, by the way, have a face-off like at the end of the show. Matt Striker's like, "Hey man, why'd you do that? Why'd you take advantage of me?" And BJ's like, "Because I wanted to win." And that's pretty much it. So, but they're doing something, which I can appreciate. So, but that being said, I think now's about time we talk about the main event of night 2. We got a no ropes barbed wire match between Steve Corino and Homicide. So this feud has lasted, in real time, like at the time, over a year at this point. This feud has been going on. This all harkens back to, mid 2002, I believe it was, where Corino and Homicide were teaming together, facing off against the Backseat Boys. And it was just a miscommunication, like we saw with AJ and Joe earlier, like the same thing. Like Homicide goes for an elbow, and Corino accidentally hits him, or maybe it was the other way around. Doesn't matter. Point is, they didn't like each other at that point, and then one thing leads to another, and Homicide stabbing Steve Corino in the eye with a fork. Steve Corino returns the favor. Homicide slaps Steve Corino in the ear and causes him to go deaf in one side of his face. They have a street fight a few months ago, which is one of the bloodiest matches I've ever seen in my life. They're choking each other with barbed wire. They're stabbing each other with forks. They're sodomizing each other. They're doing all this stuff. Blood feud to the absolute T of the word. All culminating, I would assume, but maybe not, seeing how it ends, but we'll get into that. We got a barbed wire match. So if you're not aware, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. No ropes, barbed wire match. So they replace the traditional ring ropes in the ring with barbed wire. And then in the ring, you also have there's a table set up in the corner that has barbed wire wrapped around it. I think there's a chair in there too. I couldn't really tell if it had barbed wire on it or not, but brutal setup. Crazy visual, obviously. You just have all this wall of barbed wire. And the build to this, I thought, was awesome, by the way. Like, during this weekend, we talked about night 1, how Homicide cost Steve Corino his match. They brawled backstage and all of that. And night 2, so throughout this show, it keeps cutting backstage to both guys, to Steve Corino and Homicide as they're preparing for the match. Steve Corino has his family there for whatever reason. He has Colby Corino backstage, a little like 6-year-old Colby Corino. I don't know why you would bring your son to this, but whatever. His tone is very much like, I wish I didn't come to this, man. I gotta do what I gotta do. It's like very quiet. It's very like, it's like we're walking into death row type of thing. Homicide, he breaks out the old school natural born sinner's jumpsuit, like the orange jumpsuit type deal, which to me is smart. I mean, you want to cover as much as your body as you can. Steve Corino's just out there in his regular tights, which I think is a bit of a bonehead move, but do what you will. The referee's in the ring with his hands are taped, which is just a funny thing. Like, it makes sense, but it's just funny to, like, that's how brutal this match is going to be. The referee has to have his hands taped. Steve Corino has been known for these long, obnoxious introductions. But here he's like, nope, we just want to get in, get out, make this as quick as possible. So no long intro for Corino here. So to kind of set the scene, you got a wall of barbed wire around these guys. Barbed wire table, barbed wire bat. Referee has his hands taped. Homicide comes out with a broken beer bottle. And they don't even shake hands. Like, what in tarnation? Like, does the code of honor mean nothing anymore? I mean, come on, guys. But look, okay, barbed wire matches. Like, the tone of this match is very interesting to me. Because the entire night, so night 2 is in Boston, or Boston adjacent, whatever the hell. It was probably the most quiet show I've watched from Ring of Honor up to this point. But it's like interesting because there was no like boring chants. They weren't like booing out of boredom. It was just quiet. It was like a Japanese crowd in a lot of ways. But to be fair, there was a lot of boring stuff on this second night, to be honest. But this was not boring. But the crowd has been kind of conditioned. Or maybe not. I mean, the crowd had just been quiet all night. And it was still quiet during this main event, which created a weird level of tension. Like, these guys are throwing each other into the barbed wire, raking their faces into it. There's a barbed wire bat that comes into play. Homicide stomps on it onto Steve Corino's head. Steve Corino monkey flips Homicide into the ropes, so he's like hanging upside down. He's stuck in the barbed wire. They like fight to the outside somehow, and Corino suplexes Homicide into the barbed wire. Homicide T-bones Steve Corino through the barbed wire table. They're choking each other with the barbed wire. It is super brutal, super bloody. But while all of this is happening, the crowd is fucking silent. Like, they pop for the moments, right? When the things happen, but then it just kind of comes back down. It almost gave this tone of like I feel like going into this match, like, at least I was expecting just like a feeling of like war, like just a battle between two guys. But in reality, this almost had more of a tone of like, I don't know, man, like two parents fighting. You know what I mean? Like, if you're at a dinner table and your mom and dad are fighting, and it's just very awkward and tense and like, oh God, I don't know what to do. That's like what this was. It was like just silently stabbing each other and mutilating each other. It was just bizarre to watch, but That being said, I mean, this match was as advertised. All the spots I just talked about. Just a feeling of hatred, right? And the tone kind of changes like midway through the match a little bit, where Homicide, like, because, you know, traditionally Homicide, he'll throw a guy into the corner, hit him with a running forearm, knock him to his ass, hit the ropes, come back with a face wash kick, right? And Homicide, look, there's no ropes, just barbed wire. But Homicide says, fuck it, I'm just going to go into this barbed wire just so I can kick this motherfucker in the face. Like, there's a feeling of hatred and just like, I'm just going to whip you, I'm going to whip your cock off, like thing. So it like revved up towards the second half of this, which is awesome. Corino fights back. It's the Colby Causey, hits and then Homicide hits an Ace Crusher. So they're throwing out their big guns here towards the end. Homicide at one point, he like takes a portion of the barricade from the outside and throws it into the ring, and it looked like it actually hit Corino in the head. Like, Corino has had terrible luck in this feud. He lost his hearing, and now he's got all kinds of CTE probably, but he's able to fight back somehow. Well, Guillotine LeGrande is out there with Corino, and all of Corino's young boys are out there. They get involved. The young boys, this is funny. It's like, he's such a cornball of Steve Corino. He really thinks he's like a pure wrestler, like a puriso. He really feels like he's like a Japanese legend. He's so fucking cringe, dude. But he has his young boys out there. They all throw chairs so that Corino can use it. They basically fashion a makeshift table by setting up 4 chairs and then placing the steel barricade on top of the chairs. Corino hits Homicide with a Northern Lights bomb through this barricade table, just like crashing through the steel mesh. It was a pretty cool visual. Homicide's able to fight back, though, locks in the STF, which is how he won their previous match, where Guillotine LeGrande had to throw in the towel. But Guillotine is in there. He interrupts this. He doesn't want to see this happen again. He throws rubbing alcohol in the eyes of Homicide to break this up. And then Julius Smokes, who's out there with Homicide, him and Guillotine fight on the outside. In the ring, Corino hits Homicide with 2 back-to-back pile drivers. He puts on these like ridiculous, cartoony, heavy gloves, like garden gloves or whatever. And he grabs like a strand of barbed wire, hog ties Homicide with it, and wraps it around his throat into a Cobra Clutch type move, pulls him back into like a Cobra Clutch rear naked choke type of move, type of submission of some sort, has the barbed wire around his throat, and Julius Smokes has no choice because Homicide ain't going to tap, and Steve Corino is going to kill this man. So Julius Smokes has no choice but to throw in the towel. And Steve Corino gets the win. So, brutal match. Cool finish. And plays off their previous match. So the previous match I mentioned, Homicide won when Guillotine had to throw in the towel. Now you have Steve Corino winning with Julius Smokes throwing in the towel. Going into this match, look, it's a no ropes barbed wire match. You got to think this is the culmination, the blow off of this feud. But now they're 1-1, and neither guy lost on their own volition, right? So you got to think there's got to be another match, right? I don't know. That's how I was feeling after this, but I don't know how you can get more brutal than this. So, and I should mention, after the match, it kind of cuts to like a few minutes later after they've taken down the barbed wire or whatnot. Corino, Homicide, as they come to, Corino sticks his hand out to Homicide. Homicide does not shake it. So he just walks away. Again, furthering the, there's still tension between these two guys. So are they going to fight again? Probably. That's what it feels like to me. I don't know, man. But then it cuts to Corino backstage. He's like, I was prepared to kill you, Homicide. I would have gone to jail for my whole life, but it would have been worth it. Because I want to see you die. There's a guy, just reached his hand out to shake his hand. I don't know. But Brutal stuff. Brutal stuff. And that's how we end it. That's how we end this weekend, folks. Ring of Honor, November 2003. Again, some pretty good stuff, some not so good stuff. I mean, there's some, bullshit in between, some scramble type stuff that nothing else that really was worth talking about. The typical scramble, like Backseat Boys and Carnage crew. I mean, it was like good stuff, but it's just like kind of the typical thing. They're trying to really put Slugger over in these scramble matches, but I don't think he's really that guy yet. Otherwise, I think we pretty much covered everything we needed to cover. That about does her. That's about all Daddy has for you guys today, man. I don't know why I'm not talking like this. I don't know why my voice is going like this, but appreciate you guys tuning in, listening, watching, tasting, all that stuff. Give Daddy a follow at Apron Bump on all the social medias. Apronbump.com. Hey, if you like this type of stuff, you like Ring of Honor, maybe you're just jumping in cold, you like, hey, hardest part of the ring. I would love to start this journey from the beginning and see where it takes us. Well, I suggest you go to apronbump.com and you go to the episodes tab at the top and you can select Ring of Honor, and that'll bring you to all of the Ring of Honor shows that I've covered chronologically, starting from their very first show and all the way through almost 2 years of Ring of Honor at this point. So it's been a wacky ride. It's always a fun watch, always fun talking about it. So appreciate you guys. Take it easy. I love you all. Big smooches all around. I'm hard.
Yeah.
The hardest, talk around and disregard it. Strip you off the ground, show you what hard is. Standing strong and proud, nothing I guess. Let's get it started. It's the hardest, talk around and disregard it. Strip you off the ground, show you what hard is. Standing strong and proud, nothing I